The room fell silent before the question even finished. A senator leaned forward, eyes locked on the witness, and asked one of those lines that changes the air in a hearing room, "Is that you reposting a video of yourself taking a chainsaw to your political enemies?" The answer came soft, almost casual. "That's me at the top." And in that moment, every person watching knew this wasn't just another confirmation hearing, it was a warning. What unfolded next wasn't theater, it was the kind of confrontation that strips the mask off power.
Rioters should be shot. Us returning to our constitutional business through hallways cleared for us by automatic weapons carrying SWAT teams. None of you, none of us, said those violent rioters should be pardoned. A Republican colleague said such pardons would be hard to believe, even absurd. Your former colleague J.D. Vance said the violent rioters should not be pardoned. Even Jim Jordan said pardons would, and I quote, "focus on all the people who didn't commit any violence." Well, Trump pardoned all of them. And there's a lesson in that. Every time you think Trump would never go that far, rethink that. We all seem to agree that violence against police is unacceptable, yet more than 600 people who physically attacked Capitol Police officers were just put back on the street, part of a 1,500-person personal Trump army, now out there with people who have proven themselves willing to do violence on Trump's call. In only 10 days, some are already back committing crimes. We've also tried as a committee, together, to address the dangers of illicit drug sales over the internet, and I assume we're all against murder for hire. But Trump also just pardoned a dark web operator sentenced to life in prison for trafficking illegal drugs online and accused of soliciting murders for hire. Those pardons, as Mr. Patel has said, are a mistake, but they are also a signal that we are entering a strange and dangerous time. That is the context for today's hearing. Warnings that the FBI could become Trump's enforcer, use the powers of law enforcement to stifle speech and dissent, punish political rivals of either party, and hand out free passes, get out of jail free cards to violent supporters are warnings we should heed. Here are some warnings of this nominee's Trump administration colleagues. Former Attorney General Bill Barr said, "This nominee has virtually no experience that would qualify him to serve at the highest level of the world's preeminent law enforcement agency," end quote, "and we would never be able to command the respect necessary to run the day-to-day operations of the Bureau." That's for the deputy position. Former CIA Director Gina Haspel was reported threatening to resign rather than have this nominee serve under her. John Bolton, Trump's former national security advisor, said, "I didn't think he was qualified. I was forced to hire him." Trump's deputy national security advisor, the nominee's former supervisor, said, "His ideas are ludicrous. He's absolutely unqualified for this job. He's untrustworthy. And it's an absolute disgrace to even consider an individual of this nature." That's from Republican appointees who worked with him. And here's what this nominee himself has said about using his office to prosecute journalists. "We will go out and find the conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. We're gonna come after you, whether it's criminally or civilly." Is that a correct quotation, Mr. Patel?
Senator, that's a partial quotation.
But it's correct.
In part.
Regarding his publication of his enemies list, Mr. Patel proclaimed, "The manhunt starts tomorrow," and reposted a video depicting him taking a chainsaw to his political enemies. Is that you Kash Patel reposting that at the top of that page?
Senator, I had nothing to do with the creation of that
Is
meme,
that you reposting it was my question.
and that's me at the top.
You said FBI agents were responsible for the violence on January 6th, and I quote you here, beyond a reasonable doubt. Is that what you said?
That's completely incorrect, and I appreciate the opportunity to address that.
I'll give you an opportunity in writing, but this is my time now.
Have at it.
An Inspector Attorney General investigation found that that was false. And you said we should impeach judges who rule against Donald Trump, who are, in your words, political terrorists. When this nominee tries to explain all this away, keep one thing in mind. He's testified under oath before a Colorado judge who presided over a Trump case in which he was a witness. And the judge found, and I'm quoting here, he was not a credible witness. His testimony is not only illogical, but completely devoid of any evidence in the record. That's from a judge. This is a dangerous time, and I ask all my colleagues to consider whether these plain comments by this person and by his own Trump administration colleagues should be given a blind eye, just overlooked, or whether, like the warnings of pardoning violent January 6 offenders, they're warnings to be heeded. There is an unfathomable difference between a seeming facade being constructed around this nominee here today and what he has actually done and said in real life when left to his own devices. Conduct shows character. And if you look
A senator reading out a list of words most officials hope will never be attached to their name: manhunt, enemies list, unqualified, untrustworthy, not credible. A portrait of someone once trusted with national secrets, now accused of crossing every professional line there is. That's how it started. A clash between loyalty and law, between a system that depends on integrity and a man whose record, according to his own colleagues, reads like a checklist of red flags. Because here's what most people missed: this hearing wasn't really about one man's nomination. It was about how close a democracy can come to losing its guardrails when blind loyalty becomes more valuable than truth. The senator didn't waste a second. He went straight to the day no one in that room would ever forget, the day the halls of power turned into a maze of chaos. Colleagues running through corridors, shouting, ducking, terrified. SWAT teams with automatic weapons clearing the halls. That day left a scar on everyone who worked there, and when it was over, nobody, not one person, said the attackers should be pardoned. But later they were. Over 600 people who had physically assaulted police officers were suddenly free again. 1,500 individuals, part of what the senator described as a personal army, now walking free, many already committing crimes again. The kind of people who answered the call once, waiting for the next one. The senator reminded everyone that even members of the same party had called those pardons absurd. Colleagues who had once stood beside the nominee were now openly questioning the sanity of it all. And yet there he sat, calm, composed, the picture of confidence, as if none of it mattered. The senator's words carried the weight of someone who'd seen how institutions bend under pressure. Every time you think he'd never go that far, he said, rethink that. And that's the point. Power tests its boundaries not by force but by repetition. Cross a line once, watch people look away, and suddenly there are no lines left. But this hearing wasn't about the past, it was about who gets to control the future. Then came the quotes, the ones that hit harder because they weren't from political enemies but from people who had worked beside the nominee. The former Attorney General, the CIA Director, a national security advisor, each name heavier than the last. One said he was virtually unqualified to lead the world's most powerful law enforcement agency. Another reportedly threatened to resign if he was promoted. His former boss called his ideas ludicrous and labeled him untrustworthy. When your own allies start using words like disgrace and dangerous, it stops being politics, it becomes a character study. The senator read the quote slowly, like a prosecutor entering evidence into the record. He's untrustworthy. Absolutely unqualified, a disgrace. Each line chipped away at the polished image the nominee tried to project. Then came the moment that made the hearing unforgettable, the one that sent a chill through the room. The senator read from a statement where the nominee vowed to go after conspirators, not just in government, but in the media. The words that followed hit like a warning bell. We're going to come after you, criminally or civilly. You could feel the weight of that line, not just for journalists but for anyone who believes in accountability. Because that wasn't a threat from an angry citizen online, it was from a man seeking one of the most powerful law enforcement positions in the country. The senator leaned forward and asked the question again, slowly, deliberately, "Is that your quote?" And the response came carefully, like someone stepping through a minefield. "That's a partial quote, but it's correct in part." That answer did something rare in Washington. It unified the room in disbelief. This wasn't about partisan attacks anymore, it was about the kind of person who thinks law enforcement should be a weapon instead of a shield. And the senator wasn't done. He reminded the room of something that hadn't gotten nearly enough attention, a Colorado judge's finding that the same man under oath had been not credible, that his testimony had been completely devoid of any evidence in the record. Let that sink in. A nominee for the top law enforcement job in the country had already been judged unreliable under oath. At that point the hearing turned from questioning into something closer to intervention. Conduct shows character, the senator said. And history shows what happens when security chiefs become tools of political power. He listed the warning signs: vengefulness, grandiosity, intolerance of dissent, blind loyalty, refusal to say no. Each one matched the behavior described in testimony, in posts, in quotes. It was a pattern, and patterns matter. Because in every country where democracy slides into something darker, the pattern starts the same way. A loyalist rises to power, rules bend, institutions lose their voice, and suddenly justice doesn't mean what it used to. The senator's tone sharpened. "We're being asked to ignore everything," he said, "to look at the facade instead of the record." And that's what made this hearing different. He wasn't just pointing at one man, he was pointing at the system that keeps pretending not to see. Think about it. The FBI isn't just another agency. It can open investigations, seize evidence, issue warrants. It can change lives with a single decision. That power only works in a democracy when people believe it's used impartially. When that belief breaks, the whole structure begins to crack. That's the danger the senator was describing, not a coup or a sudden collapse, but a slow corrosion of trust. The moment the public starts believing justice is political, justice stops being justice at all. The senator didn't have to say the word authoritarian. He didn't have to compare names or regimes. Everyone in the room understood the history lesson he was implying. In every society that lost its freedom, the shift didn't start with soldiers on the streets. It started with leaders who treated law enforcement like a personal army. It started with loyalty tests, with silence, with the quiet removal of anyone who dared say no. That's why this hearing mattered. Because it wasn't just about what one nominee had done, it was about what his nomination symbolized. The senator laid it out clearly: a person who reposts violent threats against political rivals, defends pardons for attackers, and talks about prosecuting journalists cannot credibly lead an institution built on impartiality. The pattern he warned about wasn't abstract, it was historical. Vengeful leaders, grandiose promises, obsession with enemies, blind loyalty, a willingness to bend the law for the right people and break it for everyone else. That's not leadership, it's the manual for how democracies decay. And then came the point that hit closest to home. The senator said when officials start targeting the press, the effect is immediate. Journalists grow cautious, whistleblowers stay silent, watchdogs stop barking. That silence becomes the sound of corruption spreading. Because when the people who expose wrongdoing are treated like enemies, the real enemies get comfortable. The senator's voice softened as he described what happens next. A government without scrutiny doesn't protect citizens, it protects itself. And every time the truth is punished, the public becomes more blind, more divided, more easy to control. He warned that even if the nomination fails, the mindset it represents is already spreading. that the idea of using investigations as weapons, or pardons as political favors, has started to look normal, but that normalization, that quiet acceptance, is how power changes shape. So what happens now? The senator offered a blueprint, not just for lawmakers, but for citizens watching at home. Demand impartiality, demand transparency, ask the questions that power doesn't want asked. Insist on the release of records, the oversight hearings, the inspector general reports. Support whistleblowers and journalists who risk their safety to bring the truth to light. Because the battle for accountability doesn't happen in a courtroom, it happens in public view, one story at a time. And make no mistake, this hearing was a story. A live demonstration of how institutions try to hold the line when someone pushes too far. A moment when oversight actually meant something. The senator closed with words that should echo long after the cameras stop rolling. Conduct shows character. Those 3 words matter because they cut through every excuse. What you do, what you post, what you defend, that's who you are. He didn't need to raise his voice to make the point. He just laid out the record and asked the simplest question in the world. Is this the kind of person we want leading the agency that holds the power to investigate every one of us? That question hung in the air, not rhetorical, not partisan, but real. Because when law enforcement becomes political enforcement, democracy doesn't die in darkness, it dies in daylight. While people convince themselves it could never happen here, the senator's warning was clear: it can. And it starts with letting loyalty matter more than truth. So what can you do? That's the part most people skip, but it's the part that matters most. If you care about accountability, speak up. Don't scroll past this moment. Ask your representatives where they stand. Support journalism that digs, not flatters. Defend the institutions that defend you. Because power doesn't erode overnight. It erodes when people stop paying attention. And attention right now is the most powerful thing we still control. This hearing was more than a political clash. It was a test of whether truth still has defenders, whether institutions built on law can survive the weight of loyalty, whether we as a public still care enough to demand better. The senator ended his remarks with a challenge that goes beyond politics. The future of accountability depends on people who notice what's happening and insist on better. That's the line to remember. People who insist on better, because in the end oversight only works when the public expects it to. And that's where you come in. If you believe that power should answer to the people, not the other way around, share this video, drop your thoughts below and subscribe. Every view, every comment, every share pushes this conversation further into the light, because the moment we stop watching is the moment they stop pretending we matter.